Hey everyone, welcome to build 27, part 2. I'm doing something different with the loops in this build. If you look back at all of my Caselabs builds, in particular the TH10, TH10A, THW10, STH10 and SMA8, I've had to do something very similar with all of the loops. Normally you have to run from the pumps here, big long lengths of tube across the front to the motherboard area, which I really don't like doing. It really looks kind of messy. But I've never really had a choice because normally the pump and res combos don't allow you to do anything else. They're restricted to a single inlet and a single outlet, and there are many other restrictions as well. But now that we have Singularity Computers Protium pump and res combos, there are really no limits when it comes to mounting options and inlet-outlet options, and it's thanks to all of the inlet-outlet options here that we've actually been able to do this configuration. We have 2 inlets and 2 outlets on each of these combos hidden around the back, going into the rear compartment of this case, and you're going to see them shortly as I start tubing up, and how this is going to benefit this build and the loops. So there will be no visible tube connecting to those pump and res combos on this side of the build at all. You can see the first part of the loop here for the CPU. It comes out here. It's going to run across to the CPU Waterblock, then there'll be one more tube that runs up to the radiator here at the top, and then it's going to run into the rear compartment hidden. And this tube here is going to be in the top compartment. And then, so that's it, just 2 tubes for that loop. And also just 2 tubes for the GPU loop. Because we're going to be running in parallel in and out from the bottom compartment. So I'm really excited about these loops and I cannot wait to get started. I've measured everything up and I'm about to start cutting and bending tube. I've completed all of the tube in the main compartment. Now the original design that I had for these loops actually had both of them mirrored. So the 2 parallel tubes that you see here for the GPU loop would have been mirrored at the top for the CPU loop. But this required a 30mm thick 480mm radiator, which needed to be installed on the outside of the case up here in the top compartment and the fans on the inside. But this is something I'd really like to do in the future because it would be incredibly clean and it would look amazing to have 2 symmetrical loops with all of the tubes lining up down the middle. If you can imagine 2 different colors with all of those tubes coming together, I think it would look really amazing, mainly with the pump and res combos also parallel. Basically everything in the entire build would be horizontal and vertical 90-degree angles, exactly. Now, at the bottom here underneath the GPUs required quite a number of fittings. You can see that I've used 90-degree dual rotary and 90-degree single rotary. And I was actually going to just do this in fittings because, there's so many anyway. But then I realized how good it's going to be able to see color down there so that we have, matching coolant color all the way down, even though they're only short lengths down the bottom here. But this actually adds a lot of strength to the GPUs to, stop them from sagging. Now, this length of tube here was really difficult because, first of all, we have 3 separate bends, which all need to be done at separate times. And then the last bend also has an offset. As you can see here, it doesn't line up exactly. Very, very slight offset of about 7 millimeters. So it took me 6 attempts to get that right, because you can't just rebend the same tube. I mean, once you bend it, that is it. If you try to rebend it, you are always going to be able to see that length of tube was rebent just because it starts to get out of shape. Obviously, it was so important that this tube lined up exactly because it's so easy to see with all of the horizontal and vertical angles around. This tube up here was also fairly difficult, but only 2 bends. But I got that in the first go, so I was pretty happy with that. But yeah, you can see how clean these loops are, because the only other thing that's going to be added here in this main compartment is the cables. There's just going to be the 24-pin cable coming in horizontally and the PCIe cables running down vertically, and obviously a few more cables here and there, the EPS, some fan cables. But I think that, this is going to be incredibly clean thanks to the loops. So it's now time to turn the build around and work on the loops in the rear compartment and the lower compartment. Looking around the back of the build, you can see what I've done with the pump and res combos. So there are 4 ports for each one. And actually, at the bottom here, each of these is an inlet and an outlet. Now, the outlets, there's only one on the entire combo, so that has to come from the bottom. But the inlets can be at the bottom or the top. So what I'm going to do, the GPU loop is going to be this one on the inside, and I'm going to use the inlet at the bottom. So it's going to come out, it's going to go down, up through the mid plate there, and this is the part that I'm the most worried about. The GPU loop was really easy to build around in the main compartment, but on this side it's going to be the hardest loop to build because I have to get from here and then down around here somehow and underneath around the power supply. So that's going to be extremely difficult, mainly running 2 tubes side by side. Now for the CPU loop, I just need to come up here and across to there, and then I need to come back from this top port here. So from underneath, straight across the top and back down to one of these ports, and then I can use the other port for a fill port. But for the GPU loop, both of the ports are going to be available, and I decided to do that just so that both of them match, even though I didn't really need to have both of them. I wanted to have them both there anyway, so all I'll do is put a 90-degree fitting on a couple of these so that I can easily use them as fill ports. And then at the bottom here, we're going to have spare ports for drainage as well. So the taps will just come straight out the back. If they're too long, I'll put a 90-degree fitting and run them down. So that's going to work out really nicely. The CPU loop back here is going to be incredibly easy to build. The GPU loop is the only concern that I have. But that's it for this part of the build log. Thanks for watching, and remember that none of this would be possible without our customers and our patrons.